Um, Unfortunately, there's not a lot else football wise going on right now. Everything's pretty much chilled out. There's really not any recruiting news. There's nothing else really going on the football front right now. We've got a little while now where it's pretty much just basketball. Um, Men got TCU tonight on the road. This is kind of their last. I don't know if I want to say like easy game, if you want to call it, because they're on the road and they're only like a 6.5 point favorite. This is not an easy game. TCU is a very solid team that they've got some really good wins. They've got some bad losses. They lost to New Orleans, I think it was. But they've also got a win over Florida. So they're kind of a weird team that's just all over the place. But this is the last one before they get into a really, really tough stretch where you got Kansas on Saturday, then you turn around and get Houston on Monday, and you take a road trip out to BYU and Utah. You come home, you get Texas Tech, you get Arizona. It's a tough stretch here. A lot of bracketology has obviously it as a 2 seed, maybe flirting with a 1 seed, depending on what kind of wins they can pick up coming up. But they've got an opportunity to pick up a lot of big wins here. If you can protect home floor, and pick up a couple of wins where maybe your only loss on the road in the stretch is at Arizona, or maybe at Arizona and at BYU. Depending on how everything else goes, you've got a shot at a 1 seed. If you go 5-2 over the next 7, or call it 6-2 over the next 8, including the senior night against Arizona State, who is really, really, really bad. If you can go 6-2 to finish the season, you might just be a 1 seed, depending on if anybody, if UConn or Duke or somebody loses, you've got a shot at a 1 seed there. But even if you can go 5-3, you maybe lose to Arizona, BYU, and then you drop the Houston game or something like that, or you drop either Houston or Kansas. You're probably a safe 2 seed at that point, and you're trying to see what you can do in the conference tournament, but it's probably not really affecting your seed a whole lot. But they got to win tonight down in Fort Worth. 6.5 point favorite, I think, is what they were right now. They just got to go and take care of business, basically keep the ball moving, try to avoid too many live ball turnovers, and they can get back and they can get out of there with a win and get back to Hilton Coliseum for their date with Kansas on Saturday for the rematch there. The women tonight are on the road in Provo, Utah against BYU. Now the women have won 5 in a row now. They dropped 5 in a row, and then they have now won 5 in a row, and now they're back in the conversation. Now they're back safely in the tournament. Back on pace to get into the top. If they can pick up some good wins here down the stretch, they could potentially play their way into a top 4 seed, and which would allow them to play a couple tournament games in Hilton Coliseum, which would be huge for them. So big opportunity for them to keep stacking up the wins. Iowa State needs to keep stacking up the wins. Obviously they had a little bit of a sleepy game against Baylor last Saturday after having pretty much the entire week off. Baylor played well enough. Cameron Carr had a really nice game, but I would say looked a little sleepy. And I think that was mainly because of their, like I said, almost an entire week off. I would expect them to be sharper tonight. You'd hope they would be, because TCU is absolutely good enough to beat them at home. So they just need to keep their shit together, keep passing the ball, avoid turnovers, make free throws, and they should be able to walk out of there with a win. So, like I said, a little bit shorter show tonight, just because there's not a lot going on. There's nothing going on for football. And we will keep moving on. If anybody's got any questions, they can throw them in the chat right now. I'm happy to answer them, maybe be on here another 10, 15 minutes. In the meantime, no, if I had talked about it a little bit on the nightcap last night for CF After Dark, and talked about it a little bit elsewise. Oh, let's see. We got a question. Who do you think will be the underrated gets for ISU next season? I'm assuming you mean like this transfer class, this recruiting class, and who's going to be kind of underrated, like a sneaky player going into next season. I'm assuming that's what you mean. Um, because if you're talking about like the 27 recruiting class, I am not up on that yet, so I'm not sure about that. But as far as kind of sneaky guys in this one, if you want to call him sneaky, I think Cameron Petaway at running back, the transfer from Bowling Green, I think is a really fun player. I don't know if I don't know if he's the starter because that could be Aiden, Flora, that could be Bryson Williams. They have a couple guys in there. I don't think River Peppers will be healthy enough in time to be able to be in the rotation on day one. But I think Cameron Petaway is a really interesting player. You can get him on special teams. He's lightning fast. He's so fast, man. I mean, I know Aiden Flora is a really good returner. Uh, you got to figure out a way to balance those two because I think you put Cameron Petaway on kick returns and let Aiden Flora return punts. I think that's how I would handle that. Do I think Carson Willich will start? That is a very, very interesting question. Because obviously, if you're going to a 4-2-5, you're only playing two linebackers in that situation, and obviously they've got some guys that they really like. Sullivan Schlimgen, an X line. They've got some players at that linebacker spot. That's one of their stronger. I would argue that's one of their stronger positions going into next season. But Carson Willich has played a bunch of snaps and he was really good last year. When he was healthy, he's been really good. It's tough. Because Bo Goodwin's there too. That's a tough question because it'll all depend. It'll all depend on how quickly Carson Willich can adapt to the system. Like Tristan Exline, he's coming from D2, so he's probably got to put a little bit of weight on, but he's coming out of the same system, and he's a really good player. And Sullivan Schlimgen's coming out, he's coming through from their same system, so he doesn't have as much to pick up on. And he's probably helping other people get up to speed. So like maybe you start him right away if he's picking up the scheme right away. I think that's tough. I think he's one of the first four. I think he's in the two deep for the two linebacker spots. I don't know if he's the starter or not. I think that will depend. Like I think if I had to guess, I think Tristan Exline is probably like the guy. Like that's the guy you're looking at as like he's the number one starter. I think. Maybe I don't know. Maybe Schlimgen. I think Exline and Schlimgen are going to be your 1 and 2, and then Carson Willich will be in the two deep rotation right away. I don't know. Yeah, Austin, he says he fits. Just don't know. I think Schlimgen's a good athlete. And Exline, yeah, that's so. The thing, the reason you would start Willich over Schlimgen is because Willich is a redshirt senior. He's played a ton of football. I mean, he's been hurt a number of times, but he's also just played a ton of football. And Tristan Exline is also an experienced guy. He's played a ton of football. Not here, but he's played a ton of football. And I think Tristan Exline, you put him out there right away. He's probably defensive newcomer of the year type material. He's that good. So maybe early on it's Exline and Willich, and then they kind of figure it out from there. And maybe Schlimgen slides in. It's tough to say. I do think Willich will be in the two deep for linebackers, but I don't. It's hard to say right now how good he will be in the 4-2-5, only because it's just a new system that he's got to pick up. I think he's got the athleticism to play in it. Like I think he's quick enough to be able to play in a 4-2-5, and that's why they kept him. That's why he stayed. But I'm just, It says only backer I'm missing is Cooper Ebel. Yeah, I wish Cooper Ebel could have stuck around, but I think you could make the case that he maybe isn't laterally quick enough for a 4-2-5. Even if like a bunch of those linebackers had stayed, I think a lot of them would have had to slim down a little bit, which I mean you can do that. Kill Brazina, I'm not sure how he would have panned out in a 4-2-5. Cooper Ebel, maybe. The guys that stuck around, I think, are going to be good fits, and I think they brought in good guys. I think they brought in some nice players at linebacker where I'm not particularly worried there. Are you crazy for saying you're not going to miss Bacon? No, you're not. Caleb Bacon was awesome. He's a great pass rusher. In a 4-2-5, he is not a linebacker. He is probably an ed. He's probably an edge rusher in a 4-2-5. He's a defensive end. You'd put an extra 15, 20 pounds on him and you put a hand in the dirt and you let him rush the passer. That said, that's not his expertise, his pass rushing with a hand in the dirt. So I don't know that Caleb Bacon is an awesome fit in a 4-2-5. His pass coverage skills are okay, lackluster at times. I don't know that the thing is, you got to remember that linebackers in a 3-3-5 they have to be built differently and they have a different set of skills than a 4-2-5. It's a completely different defense as far as what you're asking your linebackers to do. Because in a 3-3-5, in the end, you're filling gaps, but it's how you're filling gaps is the difference. And I'm right now I'm going over to PFF to see if I can find. I was curious what Caleb Bacon's pass rushing or pass coverage grades were last year. But I so in a 3-3-5, your linebackers really need to be a little bit bigger. They need to be a little bit stouter. They need to be better downhill. And they're basically they're plugging gaps essentially. And they're basically just plugging gaps. And they're filtering runs to the outside. So that way safeties can come down and attack the running game from the perimeter. And that's why you saw some at times teams that were good at running to the perimeter, that were good at getting an extra blocker to the outside, had success against Iowa State because they would end up having an extra blocker to catch that safety that's coming down. And you'd have a tackle, and then the running back could be coming around, and you'd have a safety coming in down here, but then they would bring a pulling guard or something like that around to the outside here, catch that safety, and then the running back could come right through here, right off the tackle's hip, and just cut right upfield, basically kind of where the slot would be. And should have logged into this ahead of time. But you go to the 4-2-5 and you have 4 defensive linemen on the field there. And that's your run defense. You're still fitting gaps with the linebackers, but when you're running a 4 down, it's really less about, just plugging gaps and fitting stuff to the outside. It's you have 2 linebackers kind of sitting back, and they're reading the running back, they're reading the quarterback, and they're reading where the offensive line is moving, so that way they can plug specific gaps in the line. You're not just like, 3 guys and then your linebackers are just scooching up and filling, the A and B gap on each side and just calling that day. You're just making a wall and then moving the stuff to the outside. You have your wall with the 4 linemen there, and then you have linebackers shooting gaps to take down the running back. And then, basically one is going to be in charge of fitting the interior gap, and one's going to be catching the outside stuff. You have a safety, you have a nickel corner or a safety that's going to be floating around that can help on that side too. So, they attack the run differently. And when you have that too, in pass coverage, the linebackers in a 4-2-5 are asked to play pass coverage a little bit differently as well, where they're going to be asked to drop into deep coverage once in a while. And they need to be able to have good lateral quickness to the sides of the field. So they need to be quick, and they need to have good straight line speed. And, that is going to be an important deal. And Iowa State's 3-3-5, your straight line and your lateral speed was a little bit less important than it was your intelligence and your ability to get downhill and make plays at the line of scrimmage and make plays in between gaps in the running games. So you're kind of fitting stuff. You're fitting stuff a little bit differently, and you're chasing down outside runs differently with your running backs and your or with your linebackers in each system. So they basically in a 3-3-5, ideally all your linebackers are like 240, 245, and they got okay, they've got decent like downhill speed. They're not going to be as fast to the sideline because you just don't you have your safeties covering to the sideline. In a 4-2-5, your linebackers need to be more laterally quick because you've got the verticals largely covered with your defensive line. So your linebackers need to be able to get to the side, and their safeties are coming downhill to help out in the running game there. So they cover things differently, and that's why, like, I don't know if I would have loved seeing Caleb Bacon in a 4-2-5. He was good at coming downhill. He was sturdy in the running game, but he was not. He wasn't he wasn't great at dropping back into coverage. Okay, finally got to his PFF grades. So last year, I mean, he graded out as a 72 overall defender, which is a solid defender. 76 in run defense grade, 71 in pass rush grade, 60 in pass coverage grade. Very much average, maybe slightly above average, but pretty much an average linebacker in coverage. Just was not his specialty. He played at 6'4", 240, which is too big for a 4-2-5 linebacker. 4-2-5 is all about speed. Behind the defensive line, it's all about speed. And really, you're running two run stoppers at defensive tackle and nose tackle. So you want to have two Ray Limas on your defensive line in the interior. You want two Ray Limas or Jamal Johnson. Pick your run stopping defensive tackle in the middle there. And you want quicker edge rushers. You're not really as worried about the run setting. You're not worried about the edge setters. Like, if you remember, Jake McDonough, not Jake McDonough. What am I thinking of? Corey Morrissey. Let me see. I'm trying to think. A couple of the earlier Campbell guys too. Gosh, I can't remember. But they've had a ton of them at Iowa State. Where basically just they're essentially edge setters. They're not really pass rushers necessarily. They're not gonna swim around a guy and get to the quarterback. They're more of just a run stopping defensive end. The other one, gosh, why can I not think of his damn name? He's on the freaking the Peterson brothers are perfect examples. Zach and Joey Peterson, perfect examples of run stopping DNs. They're not really great at pass rushing. They're not going to beat their guy one-on-one a ton. But they'll set an edge and they'll force a running back to make a decision as far as bouncing it out, getting it into an A gap or a B gap, and then letting a safety or a linebacker come down. They were good at setting an edge, not as good at getting to the pass at getting to the passer. So, I think for that reason, but I mean, Cooper Ebel only registered a 61.7 in coverage too. And he's actually kind of very average last year. Interestingly enough, I'm just kind of blown away by this, but Caleb Rosina registered an 82.8 in coverage, which is very interesting because I thought he was okay in coverage at best. But he was fine in coverage, I guess, but then like his run defense wasn't great. So it's interesting that Caleb Rosina graded out as an 82.8 as a coverage linebacker, which was good for 36th in the country last year, which is interesting. But I think I think if you to circle back to the original question, I think it's going to be Exline and Schlimgen or Exline and Willick right away. But all three of those will be in the two deep at either linebacker spot. Who do you think will start on the defensive line next year? Well, I think Bobby Terrell is a very obvious one. I would say, Bobby Terrell. I think you can look at the Iowa State guys for the edge rushers. I think you can look at a Jace Gilbert. You can look at a Trey Verdon. I think both of them are um, potential candidates there. Jared Ramos, I don't know if he's there just yet. See, I'm pulling up Iowa State's roster, making sure I'm just not missing people. Yeah, Bobby Terrell, Malachi Tease is interesting. Caden Crawford. I think all those guys are really interesting. I like the idea of Jace Gilbert and Trey Verdon starting on the edge next year. I think that would be, I think that'd be fun. One, to have some of the old Campbell guys back, but then two, I just think I think they make sense out there, especially because if you can get Bobby Terrell on the inside, he can anchor the interior of that defensive line, and I think you're going to be. I think you'll be in good shape there. Caden Crawford's a really interesting one. He's coming out of South Dakota. His PFF grades last year were awesome. They were like in the 90s last year. He graded out really, really well. He had 6 tackles in a TFL against us last year. And he was originally at Iowa for a few years too. So it'd be kind of fun having him back, and him going back to Kinnick and all that. Kind of having a little bit of a chip on his shoulder for that. So, all right, 7:46. So we're gonna hop off for the evening and give you guys a chance to kind of go grab a beer, whatever else, for the basketball game starts. So appreciate everybody for tuning in. This week and every week, I really appreciate the discussion, appreciate the comments and the questions and all that. I love having these kinds of discussions, especially in the off season where there's just not a lot going on. Really appreciate you guys. Excuse me. Tuning in for this. So we will see you guys again. I'm maybe next week. I might end up taking next week off because I might have some other stuff going on, but we will be back here. If not next week, then the week after that as well. So thank you for tuning in. We will see you guys again next Tuesday or the Tuesday after that. So this has been Iowa State Cyclones Live here on the Voice of College Football Network. I'm Levi Stevenson with CF After Dark. Tonight, make sure after the basketball game, make sure you check out our post game, because after the basketball game, they're going to do a men's post game and they're going to do a women's post game, and then we'll do the CF After Dark post game after that. So it'll be starting a little bit later than usual. It'll be probably like, if the game's over at 10 or a little after, we'll probably be starting at like 10:35 or 10:40 instead of 10:20. So keep an eye out for that. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, Austin. Thank you, Dukester and Redbird and everybody else, Tracks and everybody else I saw in here. So, and Chris Schubert, all that. So appreciate you guys, and we'll see you guys again next time. Thanks.